Welcome back to my podcast, dear ones. We're in episode 84. Last time I told you about my magical night with Badal. That was not so magical. In spite of having a stunning body that most could only dream about, I still had some insecurities about it. I had an outy belly button and was very self conscious about it. I also had jiggly thighs and butt no matter how much I worked out or jogged. Like the shape of the butt and thighs was amazing. No cellulite. I had the thigh gap. I had not even heard of cellulite. So, whenever I was in a situation where I might undress in front of a guy, my first thought was my insecurity about my belly button. So, when I was with Badal that time in the bedroom, one of the first things I said was, "My belly button looks awkward. Promise me you won't laugh at it." That set the precedent for what would follow. I guess any guy could see that I did not have a strong sense of self. I was just severely self conscious in situations where I should have been relaxing and enjoying. I had also told you about the slimy character Munna who kept trying to wriggle his way into the dynamic. A few days passed after the nightclub fiasco, and I had all but forgotten about the existence of Munna. At this time, I was still the librarian at the Godrej Hillside Library. I had mentioned this in earlier episodes. I happened to leave a magazine that was meant for the library, a current issue, with one of Molly's friends. Maybe a mistake. I don't remember if he had asked for it or if I just left it with him, without realizing. Raghu was on my case about the magazine and kept asking where it was. He was the one who brought the monthly magazines into the library. I told Raghu that I had forgotten that magazine at someone's place. He asked me to go and get it. So I took a train and went to Mulund yet again. With a couple of Molly's friends, we tried to locate the guy who had the magazine. Someone called up his number and he wasn't home. Or he no longer had the magazine, I can't remember which. So it was a futile trip. Munna asked if I'd like to go for a drive and hang out with them since I'd come all the way. There were a few of us and we enjoyed a nice drive. Now here's the weird part. Munna dropped off the others and said something. I did not understand what he said. And due to me being very self conscious about my hearing problem, I had been in the habit of pretending that I understood what had been said even when I did not follow what was said to me. I'd been doing this for years. I'd gotten into detail about this in a previous episode. So basically, whenever someone was speaking to me and I did not understand what was said, I'd just nod and smile. So Munna said something that I did not understand. I smiled and nodded. Munna drove to some place that I assumed was Mulund station. I thought he was dropping me off to the station so I could go home. We stopped in front of a building and Munna said he'd be back in a moment. I was a little confused, but I nodded and smiled. After a few minutes, Munna came back and said, "Come." I was wondering where we were going, but I followed him. I was confused when he opened a door and asked me to step in. Wait. I was trying to piece it together. Had we entered a hotel room? Looks like. Munna closed the door and started kissing me. I was horrified. At this moment, I could either tell Munna that I had actually not understood what he had said so far and thus not consented to being in this room with him, or nothing. Even if it meant exposing my shame, my inability to hear properly, this situation I found myself in was more urgent than preserving the illusion of my hearing being normal. I kept my mouth closed tightly and stepped back. I told Munna that I had not understood what he had been suggesting and I wanted to leave. He looked at me and laughed. He tried to kiss me again, and again I stepped back and said I wanted to leave. Munna laughed again. I was in a dangerous situation, and it was a very weird way to find myself there due to being too self conscious to ask someone to repeat themselves. I'd been getting away with this strategy so far and had never been in an awkward situation due to it, yet here I was. Munna did a few more one-way kisses and I just stood there wanting to leave. I didn't know if he was assessing the pros and cons of doing whatever, But he did not respond immediately when I expressed my discomfort and my desire to leave. Why had this mousy person thought I'd let him touch me anyway? And then it occurred to me that he probably thought I'd just let anyone get with me. Ew. So was he evil or was he just trying his luck? Anyway, after a few more unwanted and unreciprocated kisses, Munna walked to the door and we left. And that was it. I was still very smitten with Badal. One day I was alone at home and I knew no one would come back home for at least a couple of hours. So I called up Badal and asked him to come over. He said that he was not free. I got really annoyed. I thought he liked me more, but he didn't seem to care either way. I had understood that the Badal train was going nowhere and I might as well step out of it. I decided then and there to close the Badal chapter once and for all. I wondered what to do next. I did not want to waste this opportunity. And then I thought of Yash. I remembered that Yash really liked me. So I called him up. I asked him to come over and he agreed in a heartbeat. Before disconnecting the call, he asked me if I was sure and I said yes. Yash came over in record time. He told me he had stolen his dad's car so that he could reach as fast as he could. I'm not sure he even had a driver's license then. Yash didn't know what to do really, so he suggested we put some music and dance. I think he was trying to recreate that nightclub scenario because I think he was not comfortable just reaching out and hugging me or touching me. So we put some music and he started close dancing with me. And then we started making out a little. Soon my top was unbuttoned. When Yash suckled, I was shocked by how good it felt. I had never experienced so much pleasure ever before. I just pulled away within a second. I don't know why. Maybe it was the novelty of how it felt. It felt like I was floating away into another realm, completely disassociating with the present moment. And the only thing that existed in that second was the pleasure. I felt elevated, like it was spiritual ecstasy. I gasped and pulled away. At this point, I was no stranger to pleasure or the big O. But this felt better than anything I'd ever experienced. Yash did this again, and I felt that unprecedented, elevated, uplifting euphoria. I pulled away again in a second. I'm wondering if my next actions are just a reflection of my self sabotage or my feelings of unworthiness. This was the best exhilaration I had ever experienced, and I put an immediate stop to it. And what did I do instead? I kept peeping out of the window and worrying that my parents would be back any moment. Here I was, experiencing pleasure beyond anything I had ever experienced before. And instead of surrendering to it, I moved away from it and did not let it continue beyond a couple of seconds. As I kept jumping to the window and checking again and again if the car was pulling in, Yash felt the stress too. I guess I had passed on my anxiety to him. He said it was too much to be in the house and worry about when my parents would return. So he suggested we step out for a walk instead. Here I was, having gathered the courage to do something I wanted to do and really finding enjoyment in it and then immediately sabotaging it when it was going well. This reminded me of how mom would give me a list of chores to do if she went somewhere, and I would feel great anxiety sneakily reading my Enid Blyton book because I was unsupervised. And I was like, sneak reading. And the joy of getting a chance to read the book would be mixed with the extreme anxiety of getting caught. And I would read a little and then hurry to complete the chores so that mom wouldn't know I had been reading when I was supposed to be working. Yash and I had this magical moment of transcendental connection. But I still did not think that such a gorgeous guy could actually be interested in me beyond a passing fascination. Other than his unclear talking, he seemed perfect. I felt that he was too good for me. He was a year younger than me. That was another factor. I was always severely self conscious about my nose, also. Molly never let me forget, even for a day, how ridiculous my nose was. She poked fun at it every day. And I felt my face was pretty average. I felt that joke applied to me where the guy says that if a girl has a great body but not a good face, F the base and cover the face. That was an ongoing joke at the time. It was a cruel joke. And I felt that guys felt that way about me. If anyone told me I looked beautiful, I looked at them in disbelief and wondered why they were lying. A few weeks later, we were at another fashion show where Molly and Yash would walk the ramp with other college mates. I was with them to compare and also to help backstage. One of the groups of college students had used a fire prop and left it where we were getting ready. It was the Havan Kund kind of thing that is used during pujas, and there was a fire inside it going on. I jokingly held Yash's hand and said, "Hey, let's get married." In the Hindu custom, the bride and groom walk around the fire when they get married. So we circled the fire a few times and Yash played along, smiling. In my mind, this was my way of letting Yash know how much I liked him. I thought, if he likes me as much as I like him, he'll take the initiative to take this ahead. I have given him the hint. But yet again, I misunderstood something that he said. Years ago, when Nitin had told me that his mother would never approve of a love marriage, I had taken that as a hint that this would go nowhere and he was just letting me know gently. Whereas he had been, in fact, preparing me for difficult times ahead with his mother. Nitin had continued to be interested when I was in junior college, but after that comment from him, I had made a conscious effort to tune out my feelings for him. Something similar happened now with Yash. Yash had been telling me about a girl who had been blatantly throwing herself at him and how he had evaded her. What I understood was that Yash was not really interested in anything serious and that I should not really put my heart on the line. Nothing could be farther from the truth. But I didn't know that. Yash just didn't know how to proceed. Since my dad was an ex-army man, he was terrified of calling up at home. He was very scared of my dad and also my mom, I guess. Unaware of the fact that Yash actually liked me a lot, I had yet again started the process of protecting my heart. I consciously let go of my feelings for Yash, just the way I had done at the time of Nitin. After this, Yash tried to stay in touch, but I had started thinking of him as just a friend. In fact, I started giving him girl advice. I encouraged him to hook up and experiment. I told him he was too young to just accept the first proposal he received from a girl. I told him not to just get hitched as a boyfriend at such a young age and to meet multiple girls. And since Yash liked me so much, he took my advice. And we would talk about his experiences with these girls. Yash had plenty of girls flocking to him since he was quite possibly the best looking guy in college, maybe in that entire area. Super tall, great face, great physique, perfect proportions. Yash learned how to speak to the girls, how to flirt, how to hook up, all under my guidance. And I thought I was just being chill. Months, maybe a year, maybe more passed like this, with Yash never really expressing how much he liked me, and with me having no idea. I was only able to piece it together in retrospect. Yash would try to meet up. But when I had started working, it was very exhausting for me to travel all the way from Vikhroli to Kolaba and back every day. I would be so exhausted in the evening that I would just go home and sit in front of the TV when I got home and I would zone out. I wouldn't budge for the rest of the evening until it was time for bed. And this was not like me at all. I had started losing weight, not just from how hectic my commute was, but also the work stress that I felt very intensely. I am what is probably called a highly sensitive person. Nowadays they say that. So everything affected me very intensely and everything felt very magnified. Yash had made it a point to take my office phone number and would call me up at work from time to time. We would chat happily. And I never questioned why Yash was calling me regularly when nobody else from that time was. I just assumed that we were friends and he wanted to keep in touch. And I kept that attitude. I had long ago protected my heart and closed off those feelings. And whenever he called, I would be genuinely happy, just the way a friend calls and you chat very happily. One day, Yash persuaded me to visit his new store. He had just opened a music store. This was the first work Yash was doing after his college. So, in this store, he sold speakers, stereos, and these kind of things, music systems. He wanted me to see it. So, one day I went there after work. I oohed and ahed at how lovely his store looked and how great everything over there was. Then Yash asked me to step into the back office where he wanted to show me this TV and speaker setup. He said he would play a movie clip and I could tell him what I thought about the sound quality. I said okay. Yash dimmed the lights and set up the ambience. It was quite dark in the space and Yash played the movie. I saw that it was a horror movie set at a scary scene. From the corner of my eye, I saw movement kind of behind me and I turned around. Yash was about to jump scare me and was mid crouch with his hands set like monster claws. He had thought he would creep up behind me and scare me and startle me, but I had got him before he could actually do that. My sisters and I would do these pranks very often after it was lights out in our bedroom, and we would always find it hilarious and laugh a lot. So we laughed and laughed now. It was all very funny. Years later, I would find out that this was Yash's clumsy way of trying to get me to hug him. So his actual strategy was to scare me so that I would cling to him. All he had to do was talk to me. If he had given me any indication that he had feelings for me, that he was into me, I would have responded positively. But Yash was too awkward or too naive to actually express his feelings to the one girl he actually loved. And I did not understand his clumsy expressions of wanting to get closer, wanting to get to know me. Another time, Yash had called up at my work, and while talking, I told him how I wanted a couple of electronics and that I wanted to buy them at the Hirapanna shopping center. I wondered if he would be interested in accompanying me, given that he knew more about electronics than I did. Like I knew he was into those things and he had knowledge. So Yash readily agreed. On the day, I did not feel like going and called Yash to cancel. He kept insisting that he had been looking forward to it for days and that we should go. He said he was ready and leaving when I had called. This made me feel guilty enough that I agreed. The reason for my anxiety had been how late I would reach home if I did go shopping. I was worried about the fuss mom would make. I was getting intense anxiety. But I went anyway. When I reached, Yash suggested that we first have something at the restaurant. I was annoyed because that would mean a further delay and I was hesitant. But Yash persuaded me. He pleaded. He was like, come on, let's have something. Then we'll do the shopping. We sat at the restaurant and ordered something to drink and a snack. I was restless and impatient and distracted. Yash tried to make conversation. I was just getting more and more stressed about how late I would reach home. As we started shopping, something peculiar happened to me. I started seeing some weird moving pattern in front of my eyes. Like one part of my vision was blocked by this crazy, super fast spinning color pattern, like a rainbow wheel that wouldn't stop spinning at hyperspeed. I had never experienced anything like this in my entire life, and I was startled. We had been walking along one of the aisles at the shopping center, and I stopped and told Yash that something was wrong. We stopped walking, and I just waited for a while. The crazy spinny color pattern stayed even when I closed my eyes. What made it more jarring was the intense speed with which it kept spinning. Like if we see some visual that moves too fast, which is jarring for us, we close our eyes to avoid seeing it. But this bizarre spinning color wheel continued to invade my vision even when I closed my eyes. Part of me was super embarrassed to have this happen out here in a shopping center with someone who looked up to me. And part of me was annoyed because I didn't want to be here in the first place, and this was unnecessary additional stress adding to my daily job stress. I was pretty sure that it was all this unnecessary pressure, this stress that finally expressed itself as this weird spinny thing in front of my eyes. After waiting for a bit, this spinny pattern became smaller and blocked lesser of my field of vision. So we walked ahead and continued shopping. I tried to ignore this thing and pretend it wasn't there. After a few minutes, I felt better. Now to the shopping. Each time a shopkeeper mentioned a particular rate for an item, I looked at Yash, expecting him to negotiate on my behalf for the best rate, like I would have done that for a friend. Isn't this why I had asked him to join me in the first place? Because he would know about the rates and he could kind of bargain on my behalf? But Yash said nothing and just stood there. Eventually, when we had bought the items and we were leaving, I mentioned to Yash how the rates seemed too high and how he hadn't said anything. Yash replied that he noticed I didn't negotiate and then shrugged it off, thinking that if I had too much money, who was he to object? This annoyed me to no end. So Yash had seen that I was paying too much for my electronics and had said nothing, just letting me spend more than I needed to. That was it. I was even more pissed. Now, of course, I can see the complete lack of communication between Yash and I. In fact, not just the two of us. We had all grown up in an era and a country where clear communication was not really the norm. It was the era of children should be seen but not heard. It was the time of respect your elders and don't back answer. It was the time of just keeping quiet and tolerating injustices. You were not supposed to think out of the box, just learn by heart what was being taught. At least in my family, but I think also in other middle class families in my country, this was the norm. We were actively discouraged from voicing our opinions, and expressing our needs was out of the question. Also, we were used to expecting others to think and behave the way we did. For instance, I would, as would my entire family, go out of my way to make someone else feel comfortable, special, welcome, and would really put thought and effort to make their experience with us a better one. Just the usual kindness that I thought was common and expected everywhere. Do unto others as you would have others do unto you kind of thing. We had never come across the idea of actually stating your needs or expectations. And in a romantic scenario, in my mind then, it seemed to just kill all the romance. Anticipating needs and meeting them, rather exceeding them, was the norm for us. And I felt that in a scenario with a romantic partner, this is the way it should be. For instance, getting flowers from a boyfriend would be expected and delightful. If I needed to tell a guy, hey, get me flowers, what was the point of that? Might as well not have them if I actually had to spell it out to the guy. In that case, I would definitely think that it was a compatibility issue. For if the guy could not be as thoughtful as I was and could not do loving gestures simply because he loved me, then he was not the right guy for me. I didn't want to be in a situation where the guy was so clueless that I had to actually ask for a hug, for instance. If he could not look at me and understand that I needed a hug, then, in my young mind, it was a compatibility issue. If my significant other did not actually have a desire to do something for me, I was not going to ask for it. It should come from the heart, was my thought, rather than being a task that he felt obliged to perform. I would never want that my significant other did something for me because he felt obliged to. No way. If he did something, it would be because he wanted to and it came from within. It came from a place of love. With this paradigm and my new annoyance that Yash had just stood by and watched when I spent more money than necessary, that was the final nail in the coffin for any chance Yash and I might have had. I had now completely relegated him to the back of my mind. I thought of him only when he called up. And so, this love story also ended before it ever started. But this was not the last of my self-sabotage decisions. Oh no, those were very much on track. Next time, I'll tell you more about any blossoming romances and how I sabotage them. Till then, stay healthy, stay happy. Bye for now.